that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Trump's trade war begins. The anger this Tuesday night.
He attacks his closest friends and neighbors.
The anxiety.
I think everybody's on edge.
The action Canada is taking. The fears for the auto sector. And what Donald Trump is really going after. The U.S. strong-arms Ukraine, suspending military aid.
This is a bitter blow.
How the EU is coming to the rescue, and how President Zelensky is trying to salvage his relationship with Trump.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The gloves are off. The diplomatic language has been dropped. Now that U.S. President Donald Trump has started a trade war, Canada's Prime Minister is blunt about what he thinks is behind all this.
What he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator.
All of Trump's complaints about fentanyl and migrants crossing the border from Canada to the U.S. was bogus and unjustified, Trudeau now says. Canadian businesses now face a 25% tax on their exports to the U.S. Canadian oil and gas exports will be taxed at 10%. Canada is not taking this quietly. Effective immediately, retaliatory tariffs are being put on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods that come into Canada. Tariffs on another $125 billion worth of U.S. goods will take effect in 21 days. Trump was quick to respond with this post. Please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount. We have complete coverage on this day one of an unprecedented trade war with the U.S. We'll have reaction from across Canada and from the U.S. Capitol. We begin with Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa.
Under economic siege, the Prime Minister singling out the U.S. President.
Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Donald Trump started this trade war based on the false claim Canadian fentanyl is flooding the states, a reason the Liberals publicly believed until today, when the PM admitted he hoped it was a negotiating ploy.
Even the excuse that he's giving for these Paris tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus.
The Prime Minister promising Canada will hit back. $30 billion in immediate retaliatory tariffs, with $125 billion coming in 3 weeks. The current tariffs focusing on states important to Trump, like Florida orange juice, Ohio appliances, and coffee from Louisiana, and on goods that Canada has a surplus of, like dairy, poultry, and lumber, leading Trudeau to speak directly to Americans.
We don't want to see you hurt either. But your government has chosen to do this to you.
But they'll also be paying for Canadians. Auto, lumber, steel, aluminum, and fisheries, all sectors expected to be affected. The Bank of Canada projecting increased inflation, a recession, and hundreds of thousands of job losses, leading the opposition to call for help for workers and businesses.
Almost every penny of the tariffs collected should go to tax cuts, with a small sum set aside for targeted relief to workers hardest hit by the trade war.
While Ottawa is leading the charge, most provinces are taking U.S. alcohol off the shelves. Ontario going further, ripping up a deal with Elon Musk's Starlink and slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity flowing to northern states, trying to ensure average Americans and the president feel the pain.
He needs to pay the price in the midterms. If I got to go down there and knock on the doors myself, I will.
Doug Ford's strategy backed by Quebec, but crucially not by Alberta on CNBC.
I've already said that we're not going to retaliate on energy. That is such an essential product for American consumers and American businesses.
Trudeau said he hoped to speak with Trump about lifting the tariffs, Donna, a request that Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc made to U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick when the pair spoke earlier today.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. Trade wars end up raising prices, and though President Trump isn't talking about that, other Americans are. From inflation to supply disruption, Americans are being warned to brace for price hikes. Late today, there was a hint of a possible compromise. Heather Yourex-West is in Washington for us. Heather.
Donna, if this trade war isn't top of mind for most Americans, it likely will be soon. Business groups here are warning consumers they could see prices rise within days. From consumers in California,
I don't like it. Cost of living is going up, so everything is being impacted that way.
I feel scary and sad.
To corporate leaders like the CEO of Target.
I think there is some concern about tariffs.
There is growing anxiety inside the United States about the immediate impacts of this trade war.
We know for certain categories, like fruits and vegetables, those are categories where we'll try to protect pricing, but the consumer will likely see price increases over the next couple of days.
On gas and electricity, too. The New England Power Grid estimates the tariffs will cost customers an extra $165 million a year, while refineries in the U.S. Midwest designed to process Alberta's heavy crude will now pay an extra 10%. Imposing tariffs on energy will not make us more energy secure or lower costs for consumers, says the trade association representing U.S. refiners. Democrats condemn the president's move.
Not only is the stock market tanking, but also inflation is up, consumer sentiment is down, and the Atlanta Fed has now predicted that we're going to contract this quarter in terms of GDP.
Prompting this from the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. We've courted Mr. Trump's ire by calling the Mexico and Canada levies the dumbest in history, and we may have understated the point. Late Tuesday, Trump's Commerce Secretary hinted to Fox Business there could be pathways out.
Both the Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today, trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening because you know he's very, very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them.
Lutnick went on to say the U.S. may have an announcement tomorrow. Except for a few posts on social media, President Trump has not spoken publicly since the tariffs went into effect. But that will change tonight when he addresses Congress and the American people. Donna?
All right, Heather Yourex-West in Washington. Thank you. The markets like certainty, and this is not that. The TSX closed down 429 points today. The Dow Jones, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ all fell as well. Markets in Europe fell sharply too. Our senior business correspondent, Ann Gaviola, is with me. Ann, everyone except Donald Trump thinks trade wars hurt everyone. Are we seeing signs of that already?
Donna, history shows trade wars are a losing proposition. It's an economic attack or act of war, as legendary investor Warren Buffett put it yesterday. And there is no sugarcoating this. Economists tell me that if the 25% tariffs remain, Canada's on a path to recession.
We expect a recession to occur in 6 months. So basically starting 6 months from now. The reason for that is for a recession to be named one or to be defined as one, we need 2 quarters, which is 6 months of economic data.
Bond and currency markets are digesting the volatile Trump trade, too. It's a combination of higher inflation and lower consumer spending. And people are scared, and that also drove interest in gold, which is perceived as a safe haven during turbulent times. The loonie hovered at multi-decade lows and is expected to remain weak compared to the U.S. dollar. One tiny silver lining in all of this is that it makes our exports cheaper, and that can help soften the sting of U.S. tariffs. Donna?
All right, a sobering assessment, Ann Gaviola in Toronto. Thanks. A giant Canadian flag was draped on the front of the Manitoba legislature today. Premier Rob Canoe says Manitobans are humble and friendly, but when a fight finds its way to them, they know how to handle themselves. Heidi Petracek has more reaction from across the country.
It's a small change.
We wanted to bring some heritage to our drink, the Americano, so we simply just changed the name to a Canadiano.
On the day President Trump's tariffs became official, what's in a name matters.
The world has gone upside down now. You know, we have families on both sides of the border, and it really hurts.
Now there is fear and uncertainty.
It's a little scary. I think everybody's watching the news and apprehension, and I think everybody's on edge.
I'm upset because I believe these tariffs is pretty much a war on Canada.
Canadians have plenty of questions about how this is going to affect their everyday lives and how long it's going to last. And right now, there's not a lot of answers. Buying Canadian is one thing they can control.
A lot of people have already stopped trying to buy American, buying Canadian as much as we can.
It's been enough to make a 5% dent in American food sales.
It's going to make a difference for us
as a country? Will it make a difference to Donald Trump and the White House? No.
From BC to Newfoundland and Labrador, American liquor is coming off provincial store shelves. BC targeting red states.
Donald Trump is a short-sighted man who yields his power just for the sake of it.
Nova Scotia was among the first to announce its provincial measures.
Unfortunately, some people seem to need to touch the hot stove to learn that it's hot.
It's joined other provinces also limiting American access to government contracts, as is BC.
We'll be buying Canadian first. We'll be prioritizing BC products.
Premiers also offering help close to home.
We are bringing in tax deferrals to protect your jobs.
I'm just hoping it all works out for us.
Both people and premiers acknowledge that largely hinges on what Trump does next. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Bedford, Nova Scotia.
Canada's auto sector is expecting to be hit hard by these tariffs. It is important to Canada's economy, employing more than 100,000 people and contributing more than $18 billion to Canada's GDP. Tariffs will throw a wrench into that. Our Jeff Semple is in Windsor, Ontario tonight. Jeff.
Donna, the Ambassador Bridge, which connects Windsor with Detroit, is North America's busiest commercial crossing, driven by the auto sector, which now faces an existential threat.
This is going to be shipped to Tennessee.
Louis Yawn's tooling company has been in the auto parts business for 6 decades. This part was made with Canadian ore, forged in the U.S., machined in Canada, and will be sent back to the States and into a new BMW. But that process is about to become exponentially more expensive.
We never thought it would come down to this.
The auto sector is so integrated, a car part crosses the border 6 to 8 times during manufacturing. Each part, if transformed, will now be tariffed 25% every time it crosses the U.S. border.
And that 25% tariff is about 4 or 5, in some cases 6 times the profit margin for either of the two companies. So no one's going to pay it, no one's going to ship.
Auto workers arrived for work as usual, told there is no change right now.
How are you feeling?
It is what it is.
Stupid. Absolute stupid.
90% of what we build here goes south, and if the tariffs stick, plants are expected to close within days.
It's going to start biting for everybody very quick.
The U.S. enjoys an auto sector trade surplus with Canada, but Trump is targeting it anyway.
So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States.
Do you know how hard that would do to move an entire plant? It will take years for this to happen.
Analysts say it would cost billions to relocate plants to the U.S., which could bankrupt U.S. automakers.
We walk over here, hey man.
Louis Yawn's plant hasn't had a new order in 2 months because of the tariff threat. Much of that business, he says, is now going to Asia.
So all this tariff to bring back manufacturing to the United States, the reality is these tariffs are actually helping China.
And consumers will also pay the price. If Canada responds with auto sector counter-tariffs, Donna, that's expected to increase the average price of a new vehicle by more than $5,000.
Jeff Semple in Windsor, Ontario. Thanks. America's neighbor to the south, Mexico, is also getting hit with 25% tariffs.
Nadie gana con esta decisión.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum condemned the tariffs, saying nobody wins. She says she'll announce Mexico's response, including retaliatory tariffs on Sunday. Yesterday, the White House said the Mexican government has what it calls an intolerable alliance with drug cartels. Sheinbaum calls that offensive, defamatory, and unsubstantiated. China also reacted today. It will put counter tariffs of up to 15% on $21 billion worth of food and agricultural products China imports from the U.S., things like chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton. Those tariffs will start on March 10th. Trump has imposed 20% tariffs on Chinese imports to the U.S., effective today. China is vowing to fight to the bitter end of any trade war. The punitive tariffs will hit Canada's steel and aluminum sector especially hard. Coming up, how some companies are already cutting back. Canada is the largest supplier of steel and aluminum to the U.S. About 90% of what we produce is exported to American companies. Trump's tariffs put about 43,000 Canadian jobs in jeopardy. That's according to the Canadian Labour Congress. Mike Armstrong explains what the industry is facing.
This is one of the places about to be hit hard by Donald Trump.
Iveco Rolling Mills in Eastern Ontario produces steel. About 60% of it leaves by truck for the U.S. Well, as of next week, those products are going to cost their American customers a whopping 50% more.
We'll be at about the same level of tariffication as China, a globally recognized unfair trader in our products.
Now, steel and aluminum only represent about 3% of Canada's exports to the U.S., but they're being punished more than any other. Last month, the Trump administration announced a 25% tariff on aluminum imports and steel imports effective March 12th. The new across-the-board 25% tariff that came into effect today in both cases gets stacked on top, although aluminum gets a 15% break deemed a critical mineral. But there will be, as of next week, a 35% tariff on aluminum and 50% on steel.
Today, we're in a trade war. We cannot sit back. We have to hit back as hard as they're hitting us.
All of this is ridiculous.
Jean Simard is with the Aluminum Association of Canada. He says the U.S. only produces about 700,000 tons of aluminum a year, but uses about 6 million tons. In the short term, it won't have a choice but to continue buying Canadian product.
70% of all the aluminium that they process comes from Canada. It's not going to change tomorrow. It's just going to cost more.
While the impact on aluminum may be delayed, for steel it's already started. Some employers, including Iveco's parent company, are announcing job cuts, while others are putting off investments, and that's even before the full impacts of these tariffs have been felt. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Ahead, Volodymyr Zelensky tries to rebuild ties with the U.S. after it cuts military aid. Last night, President Trump announced he is pausing all military aid to Ukraine, and today there was a dramatic change in tone from Ukraine's president. Volodymyr Zelensky says last week's heated exchange with President Trump was regrettable and that it's time to make things right with the U.S. Redmond Shannon reports on the pressure Zelensky is under.
It could be $1 trillion promise.
Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending.
Announced by the EU just hours after the United States halted all military aid to Ukraine. Soldiers on Ukraine's front line will feel the effects of the pause first. This soldier wonders whether Europe can fill the void left by the US.
This is a bitter blow. It will be felt quicker than the EU or European states or coalitions, if are willing, can make up the gap.
Russia hopes the US will compel Ukraine to make a deal ending the war. The Kremlin says shifting American foreign policy now largely aligns with its position. The Ukrainian president says he's seeking clarity on the new US approach on a day when he tried to patch up differences with Washington, calling Friday's heated White House meeting regrettable, adding it is time to make things right. Zelensky says he is ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. For the first time, proposing a partial ceasefire involving a prisoner swap, a maritime truce, and a pause on airstrikes against energy and civilian infrastructure. Zelensky also says he's ready to sign the contentious minerals deal with the US, although he continues to seek post-war security guarantees. Reuters news agency reports Trump will tell Congress Tuesday night that the deal is back on. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Next, trying to make sense of the trade war. Trump's policy is America first, but the way he's treating his allies, it feels more like America alone. It's deeply unsettling that our closest neighbor, who Canadians love, count on, visit, do business with, and have fought alongside, is punishing us and threatening our very existence. This is how editorial cartoonist Terry Mosher depicts it. Our neighbor is blowing up what connects us. Eric Sorensen tries to make sense of it all.
Was it ever about stopping fentanyl at the border or an excuse to justify tariffs? If there's one thing Donald Trump has always believed in, it's tariffs. Here, before he was ever president in 2016.
Every single unit that comes across the border, you're going to pay a 35% tax on that unit. okay?
What has changed is how he views us. Remember?
We're going to work it out. It's going to be friendly. We love Canada. We love Canada. I love Canada.
But now he wants Canada, not by military force.
No, economic force.
Once an ally, now a target. The parallels with Russia and Ukraine are hard to ignore. He admires the power Vladimir Putin is using to get what he wants. And Trump's new view of heroic Ukraine?
You got to be more thankful. Because let me tell you, you don't have the cards.
He's telling Canada in his own way, he has the cards. He will cripple our economy. And then see what happens.
I would love to see Canada be the 51st state. I think the people of Canada would like it, if it's explained.
Save the explanation. Canada does have cards to play. The two countries are so interconnected, tariffs will hurt us both.
He's underestimating the Canadian people, the resilience of the Canadian people, and the strength of the Canadian people.
American investors are watching. Maybe the stock markets will make a difference. But numbers don't seem to matter to Trump. 0.5 ounces of fentanyl is all that's smuggled. He doesn't care that 20 million Canadians spend time and money in the U.S. each year. And Trump forgets that 158 Canadian soldiers died in Afghanistan fighting for our friend. Outside the U.S. Embassy in Ottawa, a demonstration of Canadian sadness and anger.
I cannot believe that our friend America would betray us like this.
The question is, will Americans come to realize not just the mutual economic harm, but the destruction of trust, self-inflicted and so unnecessary? Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
That is Global National for this Tuesday. When I took over this newscast almost 15 years ago, I decided to always end it with photos you send in. We called it Your Canada, a place to showcase what you love about where you live. It seems more appropriate now than ever. So keep them coming, show your pride, and email Your Canada to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.